Good evening, friends. Welcome to the India Power Talk. India Power Talk is a knowledge sharing initiative. We invite international thought leaders and domain experts to share their insights, experiences, and strategies related to business and the economy. Today, we'll discuss the pressing issue of climate change with a special focus on India. There can be no denying that climate change is one of the biggest challenges humankind faces. Melting ice in the Arctic and rising sea levels threatening Pacific islands are just two of the visible effects of the crisis. Add to this the worldwide increase in extreme weather events like windstorms and flooding or droughts, crop failures, and wildfires, and it becomes very clear that inaction is not an option. The human and economic costs are already being felt, and these can be expected to increase to staggering proportions if we fail to reduce the emissions driving climate change, carbon dioxide, and other greenhouse gases. And yet, despite the grim picture this paint, these negative outcomes are not inevitable. It is important to understand that industries and government have options at their disposal to counteract the trend, and too much pessimism can lead to people to simply give up. We have the pleasure and honor of welcoming a leading international expert on this issue, Ken Berlin, President and CEO of the US-based Climate Reality Project. Uh, Ken, welcome to India Power Talk, and thank you for taking time to speak with me. To begin with, Ken, could you tell us about how you first became inspired to work for climate protection?
Uh, Thank you. It's a pleasure being here, and it's really great to be on the India Power Talk, which I think does a terrific job at explaining all kinds of issues relating to economics and the environment to people in India. So it's a pleasure being here. My interest in climate change really relates to several different factors. The first is, since I was a young boy, about 10 years old, I've been a very active birder. I've traveled all over the world looking at birds. I've seen 6,600 species of birds. I've birded in India and in Asia. But out of that, I developed a tremendous interest in conservation, in protecting the land. And I've spent a lot of time in my career working on protecting tropical forests, working on biodiversity. All the work that I've done in that area is threatened by climate change. Climate change can, first of all, cause massive species extinction. And it can take the work we've done in protecting forests. I mean, India has a great system of reserves, wetland reserves and forest reserves. All the work we've done on that could be affected and really negated by the fact that climate change is going to change the climate. The places we've protected may no longer be viable places. I've also, spent my career as a lawyer. I've been working to really try and put in place a sense of environmental laws, but concerned about other laws that really make this a cleaner, healthier Earth, a place that we can pass on to our children that will enable them to lead a terrific life. And again, climate change threatens all of that. Climate change threatens our economy. It threatens the work we've done on that. It threatens to make a lot of issues like health issues much worse than they had been. And the third factor is, again, I've tried to help bring about an equitable world, the world in which people are treated equitably and well. And climate change, of course, has a much greater disproportionate impact on poor people and on poorer nations than it does on wealthier nations because they don't have the resilience to deal with this issue. So if you look at all these issues together, I think climate change becomes the dominant environmental issue, the dominant issue that I care about. And that's why I became interested in it.
Could you talk about Ken, the Climate Reality Project that you handle, its goals, and what the organization is currently doing in India?
Yes, I will. Thank you. And let me start off by just talking a little bit about the Climate Reality Project in general. As you said, our mission is to build support for addressing climate change around the world. And we do that so that really the politics of this issue are favorable enough so that we can address this major transformation we have to make in our economies to address climate change. But what the Climate Reality Project does is it trains people in multi-day trainings to understand the climate crisis. It teaches them about the issues. It educates them not only about the problems, but about the solutions and
I
we
see.
think there are solutions to all of these issues. It teaches them how to organize and become active. And when it's over, the people who graduate become what we call climate reality leaders. And we now have 11 offices outside the United States that really work on this issue and work with our climate reality leaders. We've trained about 30,000 people to date. Because of the virtual environment we're in now, we've realized we can train far more people than we did in the past. We expect to train about 15,000 people a year, and about 60% of those we think will be people from outside the United States. So we're going to have a very strong presence everywhere in the world. Here in India, when you look at building public support for addressing climate change, there are a lot of ways you can do that. You can educate people, you can work on issues, you can work on projects. And our office in India does a little bit of all of that. It, first of all, has had a major education program training teachers to speak about the issue. Last year, we trained about 1,000 teachers. We also work with schools to make them greener, to install solar, and to do work like that. We also work on projects. We have a tree planting project. We have a project really designed to work on water conservation, to train people in rainwater harvesting. And we also work on more basic policy programs. Last year, we were involved in organizing a program for people from around the world called the Environmental Sustainability Conference. This year in 2022, we're going to continue, 2021, I'm sorry, we're going to continue doing all that work. We'll continue doing educational work. We want to work with larger institutions. We're also starting to work on electric vehicles, to work on policy issues on electric vehicles, to make the introduction of electric vehicles easier. Electric vehicles are still a little bit more expensive than regular internal combustion engine cars, but that's not going to be true for very long. And as soon as that changes, we think electric vehicle use will explode in India, United States, and around the world. And we want to help make sure the right policy levers are in place for that to happen. And of course, if we do that, you'll see tremendous benefits in reduced air pollution and other matters. So that's the new item we're working on, and we'll continue to work this year on education and on projects like tree planting and on water harvesting. We also last year and continue to be involved in COVID relief effort, even though it's not directly related to our work, but obviously a critical issue for everyone.
Okay, in the context of climate crisis, why is it so important globally and also for India especially to end pollution from fossil fuels? Could you elaborate upon that?
Yes, I think, in the end, the way we look at climate change, we look at it as an existential threat to people, to the environment, to other species. And if you think about it, as you said, climate change is not a question of the air becoming warmer.
Yes.
What climate change means is heavy storms, rising sea level, droughts, floods, wildfires, acidifying oceans, and also, and very fundamentally, disruption in the sensitive planetary rhythms on which human society has developed. Climate change is a result of production of, generation of greenhouse gases and carbon dioxide, and that's done all around the world. And you can see now in India, of course, the impacts of climate change on people and on the environment. Last year, for example, the deadliest natural disaster in the world was probably the monsoon flooding in India last year. It killed over 1,900 people. It caused $7.5 billion in damages. Cyclone Amphan also brought devastation to India and Bangladesh. It caused about $15 billion in damages. And I could go on listing the issues and the disasters that result from climate change.
May I ask you, what will that take to transition from a fossil fuel based economy to a renewable energy economy? And maybe could you explain as to how India is going to do this?
I think to address climate change, there are 3 or 4 things. There are many things that have to be done, but there are 3 or 4 things primarily that have to be done. The first is, of course, we have to start building out our ability to generate energy from renewable energy and from clean energy. It's absolutely critical because eventually we have to have an economy that basically has no generation from fossil fuels. And now India is doing a very good job on that. The second issue, though, is a different story. And that issue is that while we build up our renewable energy generation capabilities, we have to start reducing our dependence on fossil fuels.
Yes.
And in the case of energy generation, particularly coal. Now, India has now about 206 gigawatts of coal production capability. And it's the third largest in the world. But the issue here is that instead of beginning to ramp down the amount of energy generation using coal, India is still increasing the amount of coal generation. And we have to start lowering the coal as we increase the generation of renewable energy. The third, and of course, on clean cars, which are a third issue, that's a question of something that's going to happen over time as cars become cheaper, as clean cars become cheaper. And, I think that clean cars are great to drive. They're fun, they're faster. Once they're cost competitive, I think you'll see a change, although it does require investment in infrastructure to do that. And I think and hope India will be able to do that on that issue. And the final issue on that is, as part of addressing the climate crisis, we really need to look at our natural resources. We need to make sure that our forests are capturing CO2 emissions, that our soil, you can capture a lot of emissions in soil. There are wetlands you can capture soils. So it's important that those systems not be degraded and that they be increased really. And I think India is doing fine there.
President Joe Biden has talked a lot about how moving to a climate-friendly economy will create jobs. Now, is this realistic, Kane, according to you? And could you elaborate as to what will be the economic impacts of making this transition in India, particularly?
Yes, I will. And I think this is probably the most important question you're asking today, because that really relates to the question of whether we can and we will be able to make this transition, whether India can and will be able to make the transition. The important thing really to understand about renewable energy is that the economics of this issue have fundamentally changed in the last 5 or 10 years. There was a time when if you wanted to switch to solar or wind, it would be at great expense. You would raise the cost of electricity, and you can't do that in a country like India, or for that matter, easily in a country like the United States. What's happened though now is we're in a situation where renewable energy is cheaper than fossil fuel-based energy, that it makes economic sense to make this transition. If we do the transition, we're going to have cheaper energy. If you don't do the transition, you're going to have uncompetitive energy. Recent studies have shown that investment in renewable energy is now yielding higher returns than investment in fossil fuel-based energy. Now that leads us to jobs. The critical thing about jobs is that renewable energy generates far more jobs than fossil fuel-based energy.
But do you think India should stop building coal plants now? But isn't that contrary to what US did as it developed its economy over a period of time?
Yes, look, there's no question the United States built its economy on fossil fuel-based energy. Fossil fuel-based energy made the United States a great economy. So it's a great question to ask, why shouldn't everybody do that? And the answer, in my view, is really very, very straightforward, which is, again, what I just said, the economics of this issue have fundamentally changed. If you build an economy out with renewable energy instead of coal-based energy, you're going to get cheaper energy generation, you're going to get a more competitive economy, and you're going to get millions of jobs. If you build new coal plants now, you face a whole series of risks. So we think that, while the United States benefited from fossil fuels, the world is different today, and India would not benefit from it. And again, that's the reason we are hopeful and confident that we can address the climate crisis, because addressing the climate crisis is going to benefit the world's economy. It's going to benefit India's economy by developing using renewable energy rather than fossil fuels. So on that basis, yes, I think that India should do that. We should go first. India can follow. India can take steps first that are slower, that do that it can do it, can transition its economy more slowly and more easily and more carefully. And we hope that India will do that. So again, we're not saying, for example, that India should close all its coal plants today, but building new ones is, I think, economically something that's very, very questionable at this point in time.
You said that you have been involved very seriously into training the teachers. Could you share your experience on that in India?
Yeah, well, I have not done it personally, of course. It's been done by our office here.
Sure.
And and I don't know all the details, but they conduct programs for teachers to teach them about how to teach and how to talk about climate change, and also how to run their schools in a way that's energy efficient and is green and in green schools. And I think the program's been a great success. It's been running for years. They keep getting many teachers applying to the program. As I said, last year they trained 1,000 teachers. This year we hope to continue to do that. And again, obviously, education and educating people about these issues is critical. And I've always been very respectful of India's education system. I think you've got a first-rate education system in the country. At the extent that we can bring education about climate change to students, it's a great benefit. We have the same issue in the United States. I think the state of New Jersey was the first state last year to mandate that climate change be taught in every grade of school. They have courses about it. So we're trying to expand that here also. And in India, I don't know that we've worked on curricula yet, but we are working on training teachers.
So how can US and India work together to achieve the transition to green energy, and which we have been talking for last half an hour? And why is this cooperation so important to addressing the climate crisis scale?
Well, as I've said before, the climate crisis is a worldwide crisis. What we have to do is by the year 2050, we have to have on a worldwide basis net zero emissions of fossil fuels. No country generates enough emissions to really do this on their own. We have to have the countries of the world work together on this. And the United States is the second largest generator, and India is the third largest generator, obviously have to play a role in that. As I said, there's a differential responsibility that we can work out between countries. But I think India and the United States have really worked together very well on this issue. They worked together well during the Paris negotiations of the Paris Climate Agreement, and they're working together now.
Yes.
There was a recent meeting of what we in the United States call the Quad countries. I don't know if you call it that in India, but it's India, Japan, the United States, and Australia. Yes. There was a meeting of the countries, and at that meeting, there was a joint statement issued by the leaders on March 12th.
Yes.
And what they said was, and if I can quote this, we will establish a climate working group to strengthen climate actions globally on mitigation, adaptation, resilience, technology, capacity building, and climate finance. Our experts and senior officials will continue to meet regularly. Our foreign ministers will converse often and meet at least once a year. At the leader level, we will hold an in-person summit by the end of 2021. So there's a very strong commitment there by India and the United States to work together. We have solutions to this. We know how to address the climate crisis. We can do it. But what our goal is to avoid it becoming an existential crisis, one thing that threatens humanity.
One message that you would like to give on climate change to India?
The message I would say is that if India can transition to a clean energy economy, the results will be cheaper, cleaner, and more reliable energy. It will benefit the economy. It will create millions of jobs. It will make India more competitive in the world. You'll be protecting yourselves. You'll be protecting your children, and you'll be making this, and you'll be ending pollution in the country. And I think that India will benefit from it. India's got great ability. It's got great education. It's got great technology, and I think India can do that very successfully.
Ken, thank you so much for your valuable time and insights, and it was a pleasure talking to you.